Hi everyone, Jason here from spiritualbabies.net, and you've joined us for the last of our series in the book of Hosea, and we're on chapter 14. And I'd like to introduce you to Rabbi Neely in Florida, who has graciously led us through this book. This is the last chapter in this. We'll be sealing this off today, and then I'll be going through the comments and questions that you've thrown up over the last few months, and we'll do a kind of comments question and answer section for this in a few weeks' time. But you'll be tuning in a couple of weeks, and we'll have started a new series. I know we want to do Obadiah and Jonah and a few others. If you've got a favorite you'd like us to tackle in the prophet section, please let us know. Thank you for coming back and joining us again on this last section of this journey, Rabbi.
Oh, good to be here.
So I have gone through this a few times. There's some interesting bits in here. It seems quite removed from lots of the themes that we've had so far. But it does kind of end on a high point, which is good. So we'll just jump straight in. Verse 1. Samaria shall be accounted guilty, for she has rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword, their infants shall be dashed, and their pregnant women shall be ripped up. So I have some questions specifically about Samaria, because there's still a Samaria today. I mean, we could do a whole show on that, but I'm curious as to what Samaria represents in this, because now we know that Samaria has its own people. They have their own version of the Torah and their own kind of religion going on.
This ain't them.
This ain't them. That's what I thought.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So Shomron which is Samaria in the prophetic works, is always referring to the northern kingdom of Israel. It's just the same way that if you were to say Judah, you're talking about the southern kingdom of Israel, or if you were to say Jerusalem, you'd be talking about the southern kingdom as well. Pardon that little text message in the background.
That's okay. Okay, and so in this instance, she's rebelled, and it says they're going to fall by the sword, and that their infants will be dashed, and their pregnant women will be ripped up. That's quite a violent end, especially I think because it's really stating and hammering home the fact that it's going to be the generations as well which will suffer. It's not just this generation. There won't be any children. The ones that exist will be killed. The ones which don't quite exist yet are going to be killed as well.
Correct. And it's important to remember, though, that it's not just saying that the impact is going to be multi-generational, but getting to this point has been multi-generational. When the destruction finally comes from Sennacherib, the Assyrian leader, it's after hundreds of years of trying to convince the northern kingdom to change its direction. So this is not an overnight punishment.
Right. But in verse 2, return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for you have stumbled in your iniquity. So there's still time for Israel to make a change and to turn around.
Correct. And that's, throughout the prophetic works, that's always been the MO, that the prophet will say, this is what's coming, and here's how you can avoid it. This is what's coming, and here's how you can avoid it. As I think we've discussed before, but I'm sure people won't mind hearing it again. It's important to remember that in prophecy, the prophecies in the Tanakh are not there to help people win lotteries. They're not there to predict the weather tomorrow. They are there specifically to change the future, to avoid the negative consequences. And the other types of prophecies that are there for solace and for comfort and hope, yes, those are more permanent, if you will. But the prophecies of doom are always conditional prophecies.
Because what's the point of having a traffic cop on a road where everyone drives perfectly? The prophet's there to get the train back onto the rails when it's off the rails.
Right. And also, what's the purpose of having a person who's predicting your behavior if you have no control over your behavior? There'd be no point telling me that we're doomed unless there's something I can do about it. Standing on the bow of the Titanic as it goes down saying we're all about to get wet is a rather unhelpful proclamation.
Yeah.
But telling the captain, avoid the iceberg or we'll all get wet, is a very useful thing to say, even if unfortunately the captain does not change the course.
Right. Okay. 3. Take words with yourselves and return to the Lord. Say, you shall forgive all iniquity and teach us the good way, and let us render for bulls the offerings of our lips. I made a few notes on this one. Take words with yourselves and return to the Lord. I assume just literally means go and approach your Creator now, and this is what you should say. Take words with yourselves.
Right, and it's the emphasis on tefillah, on prayer, that the difficulty in both the northern and southern kingdom, but in the northern more so because it was alienated from Jerusalem and therefore from the proper site of sacrifices, was that people in both kingdoms came to see sacrifice as an end in itself and as being the only point of connection with God, and really not even necessarily the point of connection with God, but just something that you do. And what Hosea, as well as many other prophets, try to remind us is that it is how we view what we are doing that makes the sacrifice a powerful spiritual tool. It's not the sacrifice in and of itself. And so he's trying to say, look, maybe you can't bring an offering here because the only temples that are available in the north are idolatrous. So instead, just come back to God with your words. Say that you're sorry, seek forgiveness, and that's more powerful and more worthwhile than the sacrifice you might be offering.
Because this is actually it's one of the verses that often comes up as a counterpoint to the argument that you can't receive forgiveness unless you shed blood. Correct. This is one of the exact verses you can go to that say, no, it's absolutely the repentance that matters. If you can give the offering, which is prescribed in the Torah, great. But the most important thing is the fact that you want to repent and you want to confess and you want to get this off your chest and put everything right.
Right, and in fact, the opposite is completely ineffectual. So the feeling of contrition and the words of contrition, of doing tshuva, returning to God, that can be effective without a sacrifice. But a sacrifice without the contrition, without doing tshuva, is just a dead animal.
It's like a voucher then, right? You feel that you can do what you want. You've got a field of sheep out the back, and for every sheep you can do a bad thing. That's what that would mean.
And indeed, we see in many idolatrous communities, including those that were idolatrous within Israel, that was the sort of mechanical relationship that they expected between themselves and their god or their gods in the polytheistic cultures. It was, how much can I bribe the god?
Assyria shall not save us. We will not ride on horses, nor will we say any longer, our gods, to the work of our hands. For in you, by whom the orphan... Oh, that's quite difficult to read. I'm only pointing out how difficult it is to read because there are going to be people at home that have this translation and possibly people at home with a better translation. I'm going to read that one more time and then you can tell what you have. Okay. Assyria shall not save us. We will not ride on horses, nor will we say any longer, our gods, to the work of our hands. For in you, by whom the orphan is granted mercy. I can see where that's going. In the text, we found them calling on Assyria and Egypt, and they're saying that that's not going to be the case anymore, and correct. Nor that.
Right, and it's important to point out that the Egypt is represented by the horses.
Oh, very good. Okay, because that's where they get the horses from.
Right.
Yeah.
So Assyria is named, and Egypt is alluded to by the horses. And then, of course, the third part being our own idols. Basically, these are the three things that Hosea has been consistently saying have led us astray. We thought we could rely on Assyria. We thought we could rely on Egypt. We thought we could rely on our idols. And all of that has failed, which is why we're now facing catastrophe in the prophecy that he's describing here. But instead, it'll be God that we look to because God is the source of compassion for orphans.
Very good. Yeah, it's sometimes the punctuation in a text, especially if it's a particularly long sentence, and you're looking for help to try and pull you out of the end of the way it's going to. By whom the orphan is granted mercy. That's not a very poetic way of doing it. I'm not complaining. Someone much smarter than me put this together.
The phrasing that you have, the last little bit, you said by whom?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, okay. So yeah, I think that's partly because it's the Hebrew does not say by whom. It says for in you.
That would make
or for by
easier,
you.
right? That would be much easier to read that way.
Our orphans granted compassion or granted mercy. So it's none of those other things. None of those other three things are going to save these kids. The only thing that's going to save these kids is God.
In the Jewish Museum here in Dublin, there's a small section on James Joyce because his probably most famous book, Ulysses, the protagonist in that, Leopold Bloom, was born Jewish, and he also actually saved like 100 Jews from Holocaust when in the Second World War. He rescued them from Paris and brought them into the UK and Ireland, which lots of people don't know.
I didn't know that. Oh.
Yeah, friend of the Jews, Joyce. But people often come in and we'll say, "Have you read Ulysses?" And they'll say, "We tried," because Ulysses doesn't have any punctuation in it. So you never know whether there's meant to be a full stop, a comma, or a semicolon, whether it's speech or thought. And I often say to people, if you want to read the book, get an audiobook, because the person that's reading it knows where that punctuation is supposed to be, and you as a listener will find it much easier.
That's good advice.
And I'm often, every time I say that, I'm reminded of Torah Study, because if you haven't studied it before, it's much easier to do it with a teacher than it is to try and figure it out yourself, because in the same instance, they know where the punctuation goes and whether, what it all means and how it all goes together, and you as a listener can get it, much more effectively for the first time around.
And more to the point, exactly on that topic, the phrasing is much easier to read in the Hebrew because the Masoretes put in the punctuation marks for everyone. And so, when you were struggling to figure out where to put a break and breath in that English sentence, which is incredibly clunky, I'm staring at the Hebrew going, what are you talking about? It's easy. It's right after the Etnachte. It's all laid out for me right here with the trope.
5. I will remedy their backsliding. I will love them freely, for my wrath has turned away from them. I'll go, actually, you know what? I might do 5, 6, and 7 because they're all linked together.
Just want to point out that in 5, remedy is an interesting translation, but the literal word is heal.
Oh, that's much nicer.
I will heal their affliction.
Yeah, I like that version better, because a heal is a full stop. A remedy could be just something to pass you over.
Right. It has a different feeling in English, definitely.
Yeah, it's very good.
I mean, remedy certainly has a healing connotation to it in English. This is a home remedy, that kind of thing. But I think heal, personally, sounds a little stronger in the English.
I will be like dew to Israel. They shall blossom like a rose, and it shall strike its roots like the Lebanon. Its branches shall go forth, and its beauty shall be like the olive tree, and its fragrance like the Lebanon. So when we hear Lebanon, we should think big trees, right?
Not just big trees, but you should be thinking cedar in particular. And that will explain the fragrance, because anybody who's been around cedar wood knows that cedar is incredibly aromatic.
There's an interesting turn of phrase there, and it shall strike its roots in like the Lebanon. I'm assuming strike is rather than touching the ground with force, it's piercing the ground, because I assume strike its roots literally means have a huge root structure.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Drive its roots in, yes.
I will be like the dew to Israel, and they shall blossom like a rose. So this fragrant water shall come, and it's going to help Israel blossom and strengthen its roots and create branches and be beautiful like the olive tree. And this is all this is the creator, right? The dew. This isn't the prophet speaking. This is still the
Yes,
Creator speaking through Hosea.
exactly. The I part of all of this is referring first person from God.
Mm.
Not that Hosea is going to heal, not that Hosea will be like dew, but God will heal, God will be like dew. One of the phrases that I think is also worth pointing out in verse 5, right after the heal phrase, what translation do you have again?
I will love them freely, for my wrath has turned away from them.
Right. So I will love them freely. Very good phrase. But I want to make sure two things. One, that the "for my wrath has turned away from them" is a clause that modifies both verbs in the first half of that sentence. Right. I will heal them and I will love them. Both of those are because my anger has been turned away. Does that
It's
make
that,
sense?
yeah, it's that polar aspect we often get of the Creator in a text where he's facing you or he's not facing you.
Exactly, and here there's a very interesting linguistic callback because what is it saying? It's saying God will, His anger will turn away from us. Why? Because we have turned towards God,
Mm.
right? Because that was what we were called on before, back in verse 2, right? Return to God, and the Hebrew word for return and turn are from the exact same root. That's where we get the Hebrew word tshuva for doing repentance. So we turn towards God. God's anger turns away from us, and that means God will heal our afflictions, and God will love us. The word could almost be translated voluntarily, meaning that this is going to come without condition or needing to be earned, other than by our returning.
I think
That's all that's being asked for.
I think I read in the Rashi commentary that he uses the word charitably. I will love them charitably.
Anything that captures the notion that what's happening here is non-transactional,
Mm.
right? God is not saying that we have to earn His beneficence. All we have to do is want it. All we have to do is turn towards God,
Mm.
and that's a very important theme that comes up throughout many of the prophets. That God is not waiting for us to hit some high watermark of righteous behavior in order to recover from the disasters that the prophets have predicted. God is simply waiting for us to turn towards God. That's it. And once that happens, everything will be forgiven and forgotten. Nothing else is needed as an intermediary step.
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? It doesn't say turn to me and then bring 72 bulls. It's purely it's an action that they can all do without any tools and without any livestock, and just in a snap of a decision, they can make that happen.
Right. And again, the prophets routinely emphasize that what God is asking for is not onerous. This is not a huge price tag. This is not even a huge amount of human effort. It's just point your heart in the right direction, people. That's really all that's needed. And then once you return, then yes, we will build a society on Torah and all the other good stuff. And that's where we get this whole notion of being healed and back and strike root and become strong and flower and blossom. That is then the result, but it's not the precursor to the redemption.
Those who dwelt in its shade shall return; they shall revive like corn. That's an interesting choice.
Remember, corn. It doesn't mean the yellow stuff growing in American fields. Corn is the Old English word meaning grain.
Oh yeah, see, when you say corn, I don't see corn on the cob. I see wheat. So I still we don't do much in the way of corn on the cob here.
Oh, you're missing out. It's wonderful stuff. But grain is probably better than wheat. Wheat is a specific type of grain. It has a different Hebrew word. This is really more just grain.
So those who dwelt in its shade shall return. They shall revive like corn and blossom like the vine. Its fragrance shall be like the wine of Lebanon. This is a great. I mean, if I was planning a holiday, Lebanon would certainly, not now, but then. It's got great wine and it's got great smells and it's got nice trees. Okay, 9. Ephraim, and this is a difficult phrase too. What more do I need the images? I will answer him, and I will look upon him. I am like a leafy cypress tree, and from me your fruit is found. You're going to have to unpack that completely,
All right. Well,
especially that
it's
first line. What more do I need the images? Question mark.
right. So that really the excuse me the, the first half of the sentence, or perhaps even more, is an exclamation by Ephraim. So you have to imagine almost like a semicolon after the word Ephraim. Ephraim, meaning Ephraim will then say, "Why would I do anything else with these images? Right? I am giving up on my idols, because when I respond, when I answer towards God, right, and I look towards God, then I'm going to be like the cypress, right? I'm going to be the leafy, I think was the term you use, or verdant is sometimes used. And so basically, Ephraim will finally get it.
Ah, okay.
Right? He is finally recognizing after all of these steps, right? First, you return towards God. The land is built up again, and everything becomes wonderful, and your work is bringing forth life from the ground. And then they'll finally go, now I understand, right? Why was I bothering with the idols? All I needed to do was be with God. And when I answer God, look at how good things are, right? Everything is good. And then God answers and says basically, yes, from me is where your fruit comes, right? The fruit being a broad term for sustenance,
Hmm.
not just, hanging off a tree. So there's almost like a little dialogue here of Ephraim slapping his forehead, going, now I understand. Now I'm going to get rid of the idols all because I'm seeing how good stuff is when I'm with God. And God goes, yep, it comes from me.
Yeah, it should be like, why do I need these images? And then it should say, no, duh. I could do the compact version. Yeah. Okay, last verse, last chapter, last book. Who is wise that will understand these, discerning and will know them? For the ways of the Lord are straight, and the righteous shall walk in them, and the rebellious shall stumble on them. And that is the end of that line. But we will talk about that. It's kind of interesting that that's the sign off.
Mm.
Who is wise and will understand these, discerning and will know them. It's the assumption there that there'll be people looking at this and get to the end and still not understand what it's about.
Well, so there's a very subtle insight that's being offered in this last verse, which is the ways of God, the paths of God, that they are in and of themselves straight and smooth. But those who seek to live righteously will be able to walk them and will find them smooth, and will not chafe against the ways that God gave us. And those who are not interested in living righteously, those who seek to do horrible things, into the same path, they're going to stumble. And how can you have different results from the same thing?
Mm.
Right? How can you have one group walk the path and find it easy, and have another group walk the path and stumble in it? And the answer is, what is the intent of those who are trying to walk the path? And indeed, unfortunately, we've seen that there are plenty of people out there who purport to walk the path of God, but do so with animosity or anger or other negative or greed or arrogance in their heart. And in the process of doing so, they actually stumble, even though they are, in quote, walking the path, because they're not walking in the right direction. I guess actually that's not a bad metaphor. It's like you could imagine, you could have a path, and one group is walking to the left, and one group is walking to the right. And those who walk to the left are having a much easier time than those who are walking, say, uphill on the path going the wrong direction. Same path, but their direction is a big problem. And sometimes that's hard for people to still get.
Mm.
That you're going to see two people who are both purportedly following the path, and they're going to have very different outcomes, and you might be confused by that. So think about it. There's a reason why the path in and of itself is not sufficient. Just like going back to the phrase that the sacrifices in and of themselves are not sufficient.
Very good. Okay, I think we're done.
I think we are.
Do you have anything left in your notes?
I've tried to slot everything in as we
Brilliant.
went, so I think
Okay.
we're good.
Excellent. Well, I shall sign off, and then we can talk about what's going to happen next. Okay. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you've done all this in one sitting, let me know in the comments. I'll be super interested to know if you did that. Well done, you. If you've got recommendations, or if you've got a particular book you'd like to look at next, let us know as well. We'll add it to the list. Thank you very much, Rabbi, for giving us your time.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
It's been a great amount of fun and very educational. And we'll see you all again with a brand new topic very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.